green bank, which is by far the most prominent monument on the site now, covers elaborate stonework. First of all, of about 700 BC, in which it's a stone wall with a wooden structure strengthening it inside, defending about 9 acres of the hilltop, in which was put a village of perhaps 50 to 200 souls. This is at the junction of the Late Bronze Age and the Iron Age, in which perhaps still the ordinary day-to-day routine tool for working wood was something like this, a socketed axe. And it's an excellent tool for mortise and tenon joints and the other bread and butter work of such wood construction as house building, or indeed the wooden framework inside the wall itself. Right from the start, the structure was high, impressive, and in a military sense very powerful. Who was it to defend against, and what sort of weapons did they have? Well, it's not likely that it was to defend against massive territorial invasion. More likely it was to defend against the people of the neighbouring hill forts. The next one over there is Leckhampton Hill, perhaps in fact not built until a little later, but the way in which one can imagine it perhaps is Leckhampton versus Crickley at home, 2:30 Saturday, in which the young men could show their valour and their skill, because the archaeology suggests that successful aggression was accounted automatically to be a very high good. It was a kind of success that everyone understood. The weapons, perhaps, these, for the very earliest hill fort here. I'm wearing gloves so as to keep skin acids from them. These are Late Bronze Age leaf-shaped swords from a few miles to the north in Gotherington, found inside a hill fort themselves. They're superb weapons, the high technology of their day in some respects, with the weight, as you can see, well towards the point, so that they could be used for slashing effectively, almost axe-like, but with a good point and a fine edge, so that they were always effective too as stabbing weapons, thumb on the blade and strike upwards. Very expensive they must have been. They weren't merely ceremonial weapons, although they look handsome and will originally have been indistinguishable in colour from gold itself. We do find examples of them and fragments of them which have scars on the blade, notches, which can be shown to have been made by other similar bronze blades. They fenced with them, perhaps fencing of a rather formal kind, but that's something we may never truly know. The defences and the weapons sheltered a village which wasn't specially military. It was an ordinary, peaceable, agricultural village in its daily life, building and maintaining their houses as villagers have had to do to support the fighters since the beginning of time. This is the main street of the first Late Bronze Age, Early Iron Age settlement, of rectangular houses on the main ridge at the eastern part of the defended area. It was a village perhaps of 50, 200 souls, somewhere between the two, who will have thought of themselves probably as members of a great family, although there may have been foreigners among them. They probably thought of themselves as related, in a family sense, to the peoples of the other hill forts in the hills around here. The houses were rectangular, well built, proper timber jointing, the joints probably made with tools like the socketed axe, and they will have had a chieftain among them who will have been thought of to some extent as the father of the community. On the site, the inhabitants will have done woodwork to a high enough standard to build stable, sophisticated houses, pottery, metalworking, weaving, and they will have traded with other settlements for the things they couldn't produce themselves. The economy based on the cattle, sheep, pigs, and wheat and barley of their Neolithic forefathers, but probably with better methods. This village was attacked and destroyed. Not only the village itself was burnt, and all its houses, but the defences themselves were slighted. The inner facing wall of the great rampart was torn off, and it was set alight in a west wind so that the wooden reinforcements inside the structure itself caught fire, raised the temperature inside the wall to 800 or 900 degrees Celsius, and turned all the rubble inside it to quicklime, which later slaked to leave a mortary aggregation which is still there today, and on which the later builders reconstructed their defences. The next occupants had a different tradition of architecture. They built roundhouses, and in particular the great roundhouse which seems to have been the centre of the settlement. It's an engineering triumph, characteristic of Britain at the time, especially South Britain, perhaps the 6th century BC. It's a very large structure with a conical roof and no central support, which implies a very considerable knowledge of timber jointing and stresses, which I'm sure they could never have analysed mathematically, but they could handle them, to make it stand up, let alone to make it last as long as the occupation remains suggests that it did. They made the walls higher, and they built a hookwork to defend the entrance, to force anyone coming in to turn his undefended right side, the shield was carried on the left, to the main wall, so that if the people in the village saw a visitor they didn't happen to like, he was appallingly vulnerable. It did them little good. The site was attacked and burnt again. The new stonework was reddened with the fire of the timber burning around it, and the site was abandoned now, perhaps about 400 BC, until the Romans had come